Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that will give you a skill set that will make you marketable for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach from Metro Atlanta.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent, also from Atlanta, currently in North Carolina.
And I'm David Williams, and I'm a dad from Chicago, Illinois.
This week in the news, The Surveilled Student, a great article in the Chronicle of Higher Education by Katherine Mangan. Our book chapter is, How Can I Save $10,000 More Than Most Students Who Attend College? Our question from a listener is, how much does a letter of continued interest help for the waitlisted student? Our interview is part 4 of 6 with Julia Esquivel, the former admission officer and current Milton Academy College counselor, on how to work more effectively with your school counselor. And our college spotlight comes to you from the Northeastern University.
And Dave, if I could sing, my friend, it'd be a big HB to you, my friend, the big 58 yesterday.
Well, no, see, we start counting backwards after 40, so I'm 32.
And Dave did something that's really smart for anyone out there who might have memory issues. He got married on his birthday. So yesterday was his birthday and his anniversary. I was like, why'd you do that? He said, I'll never forget my wife's anniversary that way.
That's right. Now, truth is, I still somewhat forget, but she remembers.
So congratulations to the big
you.
B and the big A. So that's awesome, my friend.
The joints are a little more creaky, but they're still working and turning. So that's, count your blessings.
There you go. Well, we are going to dive right in because I kind of went on steroids this week in prepping for the Northeastern College Spotlight. So that's going to be maybe one of my longest ones. So I want to get right down to business. So for our admissions tip, every college has a personality. So what I want students to do is take 3 to 6 sentences and write on paper the personality of each school on your list. If you can't do it, then you don't know your schools well enough. And if you can do it, it's a great way to think through whether each school on your list is a match for what you're looking for. Dave, you're ready. This one might be a little tricky. I put this on the higher level. We'll see. You got demographic. See, when you get one right, I up the ante.
I noticed that, man. It's like one of those wicked computer tests where it keeps on going and getting harder the more you get right.
There you go. Dynamic scoring. All right. We call it.
Right.
So the term is shaping down.
Shaping down. It's got to do with shaping the class profile somehow, I would guess. And shaping down would be, I have no idea.
Well, for a while, I thought you might get it. And then you said profile, so he's probably not going to get it. So I'll give an example. I do boarding school placement as well. And boarding school placement works a little different in that you get to have quite a bit of conversations about the kids. Like you get to have counselor calls pretty much for everybody. So I had a counselor call actually yesterday. And I wanted to find out if somebody that I referred was getting in. And the admission officer said to me, so far it's looking good. She's made the first cut. We've got her right now as an accept. But I'll know over the weekend. So what happens is college admissions, boarding admissions, the same thing. You have your initial round where you go through, you rank everybody. You have a certain amount of people that are completely acceptable. The problem is you normally admit too many people. And then you hear back from the dean, we're 200 over. And that means you need to shape down, which means make cuts. So people went from accept to waitlist, and they didn't even know they got a waitlist letter, but they were originally accepts, even that they never knew it. So it's called getting your class down to the right number. Does that make sense? Shaping down.
Yeah, it's like NFL. It's all the people that come into the training camp ain't the same that makes the final cut.
There you go. There you go.
Okay.
Nothing like a good illustration. All right, my friend, take our article away. Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
This is part of a series in the Chronicle for Higher Education on retaining underserved student strategies for success in the post-pandemic era. And it's by Katherine Mangan, and this part is entitled The Surveilled Student. I'm going to give a very brief intro because I know, Mark, you did have some extensive insights you'd like to give. But bottom line is, students have come to the realization that they are under constant surveillance and they don't like it under a variety of reasons. The first example they gave was in Oakland University on the bioscan buttons. And in response to the pandemic, they were asking students to wear these specific type of buttons that monitored their vital signs and their temperature and their heart rate. And if there were abnormalities, it could alert the university or the health authorities that you may be infected with the virus or coming down with COVID. The students were shocked, I tell you, that people could actually be monitoring their life signs in such a manner. But a more serious objection raised by many students, such as the University of Illinois at Urbana, was the fact that they were being monitored, they were being proctored online when they were taking their tests, and that these testing services were using such dastardly methods as requiring that before the test, they use their computer camera and swing the laptop around the room to make sure that there is no one else in the room while they're taking the test. They're also using such dastardly technologies as voice recognition to make sure it is actually you speaking on the computer and not someone who's impersonating you. And to make things even worse, there was one service that opened up, which it was an app that you could speak into, and it would monitor the stress levels and the modulation in your voice to see if you were actually depressed or if you were at risk for any type of self-harming behavior. And if it found that you had some of those characteristics, it can alert the school authorities or the appropriate authorities that you may be at risk for depression or self-harm. And lastly, there were even some concerns about facial recognition technology, that in many of these testing sites, they are using cameras to monitor you while you're actually taking the test, to make sure your eyes are front and center, to make sure that you're not consulting other extraneous sources. They use techniques to shut down access of your browser to make sure you can't use cheating or certain programs like Chegg to get the answers and so forth. And so the whole scope of this article was that students realized that because of the pandemic, because of the focus online, and because of the march of technology, we are on the cusp of being surveilled all the time. And whether it's in response to checking our vital signs to make sure we are not infected with COVID, or making sure that we're not cheating on a test, or even checking our emotional health, we are fast moving to a society where technology reigns supreme and Big Brother somewhere knows everything about you.
Dave, you know what? This is almost your 60th week. I think that was your best summary ever of an article, man. You just nailed that thing. That was good, man.
Well, the truth is I had the speed read.
Don't tell everybody the behind-the-scenes story. All right, we will. I gave Dave the wrong article, so he had an hour to prep, but he sure nailed it in an hour. All right, I'll bust on myself. But he's ready for next week's article.
I am. The good news is, Rick Clark, I got you covered.
He's got that one prepped. All right, so here we go. So this is a fascinating stat I found from this article. It says an EDUCAUSE poll found that 54% of higher education institutions were currently using online or remote proctoring services. And another 23% have plans on or are considering using them. So fully 77% either using or planning. I had no idea it was that high. So that was a little bit of a eye-awakening for me. The interesting thing, and this is what I want to throw back to you, Dave. You can be thinking about this, and I'll make a few comments. And that is, if you were the one making the decision, are you an advocate of this type of tracking surveillance software, or are you against it? And let me kind of lay out the case sort of for both sides. So here's a quote from somebody who studies this stuff, expert in studying. There actually are experts out here that study things like surveillance software, who's concerned about it. So here's a quote. It says, "This wariness isn't limited to students. Colleges scrambling to keep students healthy and educationally on track have erected a mass surveillance structure that won't just disappear and may have lasting impacts on the student experience. There's a tendency with this tracing technologies for them to linger after their initial purpose fades," according to Sarah Igo, a professor of history at Vanderbilt who studies surveillance and privacy. So that's sort of one of the arguments against it. You know, the invasion just keeps going. It doesn't stop. Now, here's an argument in favor of it. David A. Stone, a professor of philosophy and chief research officer at Oakland, who led the team that selected and evaluated BioButton. BioButton was the surveillance software that they used to see what's happening with the students regarding COVID. And he says, as he sees it, handing over health information is a relatively small price to pay if it means halting the spread of the virus that has ravaged the nation. When you consider that hundreds of thousands of people have died in this pandemic, is it too much to ask to share your heart rate and your temperature, he asked? And so those are a couple of the sides. And then it goes on to say other campuses talked about privacy objections. Now, the article mentions several other things like the software being faulty. You know, it talks about things like how people with disabilities, sometimes it would trigger, sometimes more dark-skinned, complected people. The facial recognition software was triggering, and it talked about Brown University thinking somebody had violated, you know, their ethical policy, and they found out the person was nowhere near where they claimed that they were. So I'm not talking about technological failures. The article talks about that quite a bit. It goes over 4 or 5 different technological failures that have happened. Assuming there's no technological failures, I'm curious, like, what side you come down on this equation. I will sort of tell you where I come down first and then sort of see what you think. So I know there's fears about Big Brother invading. I get that. But one of my favorite quotes actually comes from Oliver Wendell Holmes. And it simply says this: "Your liberty to swing your fist ends where my nose begins. Your liberty to swing your fist ends where my nose begins." Another version of it is you can't cry fire in a theater, right? Like, in other words, there are limits on free speech. And we know cheating is rampant. So I personally don't fall to school for using, you know, some software to try to identify who's cheating. Now, of course, it needs to not be, you know, it needs to be accurate. But I come down on the side of, I see a usefulness for this type of surveillance software. Nobody likes it. If I was a student, I wouldn't like it. But when I look at how rampant cheating is, I personally think it's appropriate. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that for all you students and everybody who's concerned about surveillance and security, the horse is out of the barn. We are already more surveilled than we ever have been, and it's not going to change, and it's only going to increase. I'll give you some examples. Just the other day, I got alerted on my phone that I have a Google timeline that I've never activated. And it says you can track all your steps that you've ever done ever since you've had this phone. And so they popped up February 3rd, in which case I happened to be in the Virgin Islands at that time. And they popped up a map of the Virgin Islands going right down to the little street level. And they mapped out exactly where I went from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed, including going to the hospital, to going to the grocery store, to going to my little Caribbean spot by the beach and had a little beer and so forth. So that was busted there. They knew everything about me. Right now, when I enter any hospital, they already have thermal scans. So you put your head against the camera and it scans your temperature. Whenever I write a prescription now, in many states, it's two-factor identification. So what happens is I log onto the computer screen, and then there is fingerprint technology where I put my fingerprint on, and it automatically sends a code to a central computer somewhere in the state, and then they send back a code to a special app on my cell phone. And then I have to put that code into the computer so it can verify it's me before it will write the prescription. It's called two-factor biometric identification. Every time I get a state license, they require my fingerprints. So I've literally been fingerprinted by the government over 20 times in the last 10 years. And I just learned that the city of Chicago has more cameras because of crime. So when you walk down the street, you're being tracked by an average of 30 to 40 cameras. And you add on the fact that everybody has a cell phone. And if you show your butt any place, they're going to be actually filming you and loading it onto Instagram and making sure everybody realizes that you're a Karen or a not so Karen or a Bill or a Bob or you're not acting right. So we are the most surveilled. And the Chinese have technology right now that's facial recognition and gait recognition technology that far surpasses anything that we're utilizing in the West, that they're actually selling to Western countries and they're buying them. So Big Brother is here. George Orwell was right. And it's just a logical extension that we will use the technology that we already have in place to make sure you're not cheating on your exams, that you're not walking to class with a fever, that you are who you say you are. I'm sorry, it's here, it's happening. And if you don't really like it, I'm sure Mark can do a college spotlight on Timbuktu. Sorry.
So your point is it's a moot point. We could argue it all we want. It's happening. Your point reminds me a lot of Edward Snowden.
Edwards, absolutely, yeah.
Who, I think he's in exile somewhere for sort of his whistleblowing. But I can't remember who it was, but some 60 Minutes got an interview with him. And I saw it, and he started talking about this phone you have in your hand, the power it has to track everything you're doing. And then he said the first thing he does when he gets a phone is he goes in and he reconfigures it so it can't do all this tracking. But he shared what is knowledgeable and what's oftentimes being sold.
Yeah.
To other people. So your point is it's happening anywhere, and students, you can beef all you want, but it is what it is. It kind of reminds me of when I've gone over with Anika a lot of times talking about demonstrated interest, and I've got into predictive analytics and how, your online footprint is tracked. And Absolutely. I've sometimes made a big deal about it. And she's like, what's the beef? Like, why are people upset? Like, that's happening. You go into Amazon, you don't buy something, you go somewhere else, it pops up on the screen. It's happening for business. Like, it kind of is what it is. It's the 21st century. That's sort of her point. And that sort of seems like it's your point as well.
Yeah. I know I was getting older when all of a sudden I got all these uninitiated ads for memory support, ARB, and erectile dysfunction.
There's a word for that. It's called TMI. I never thought erectile dysfunction was going to make it on the podcast, but you get a surprise every day, I guess.
Hey, well, I can tell you, I was like, I never asked for that ad, but there it is. Someone knows who you are.
I remember the first time my boss, in admissions, got her notice about her AARP card. And she, because they send that out around like 47 or something, That's right. Before you even hit 50. She was freaking out like, what are they doing? I'm not old.
That's right.
So is there anything students can do? Is there any pushback to avoid abuse from happening? And should students feel confident that abuse is not going to happen?
Well, yes, there are things they can do, but two things. I want to just add into that. Remember, it was months ago we talked about Chegg and the explosion of cheating. And I think we mentioned there, for every action, there's an equal and an opposite reaction, right? So, they started with online and they had an honor system and people were cheating like crazy. So now you can't basically expect to go back to online system because in the very article it mentions, hey, but if you go back to the honor system, what about all those people who are using Chegg to look up answers and get perfect scores? So you have to balance the reality of life and human nature. I can tell you that one of the things that are going to lead to things like biometric scanning on steering wheels is carjackings. People are coming in and stealing people's cars at gunpoint. Simple solution: have the steering wheel basically programmed that it only monitors your bioscans, your fingerprints. Take my car; it'll die in two blocks. And then people will say, that's an invasion of privacy, but it's also a response to the badness of us not being able to trust ourselves. So what can students do? we can try and go back to an honor system, but you still have to find a way to monitor people's honor. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So let me ask you this way. Should students have confidence that it's not being abused? Abuse to me would be a couple of things. It would be selling your information to outside sources. It would be making accusations that are not correct because you have faulty software and you think you're definitive and you're really not definitive because it's error prone.
No, I think we should all be scared because I think that abuse is rampant and about to get worse. I mean, just yesterday we were watching the new scare is the ability of people to use software to alter videos so they can put your face on some other body and say it's Tom Cruise and it's not Tom Cruise, or have the Queen of England giving a speech and it's not the Queen of England. So I think with every technological advent, it's ripe for old abuse and new abuse, and we're always going to have to be vigilant for it. So that's the downside. So no, I think people are right to be worried. I think all the things you mentioned are going to increase.
You're just saying they're just screwed because
yeah, well, yeah, it's part of the life it's part of the trade-off we have. Everybody loves an iPhone. Everybody loves social media. Everybody loves being able to order food on Amazon and have it come by DoorDash in 10 minutes. But there are downsides to every advantage. And you have to manage the downsides as just a cost of the advantages of the technology that we're enjoying.
I'm trying to end on an upbeat on this article today, but I'm scraping to find one. I guess hopefully if the technology's good and you're doing the right thing, it'll be validated for you.
Well, let me give you the upsides. The upsides of having a bio button is that it tells you if you become sick and helps keep other people healthy. So hey, people know that I have a fever. Well, as one person said, don't you want to know that you have a fever? It's like, hey, people can tell if I'm cheating. Yes, but don't you want to know if your other classmates are cheating? Because if they're cheating, they're screwing up the curve for you.
Right.
People can tell by the modulation of my voice that I'm depressed and I'm about to kill myself. Well, don't you want help if you're depressed and you want to kill yourself?
There you go. That's a good point.
So the point is, I'm saying that there are pros and cons and balances. And hey, if you want to go back to the 1950s where we had manual transmissions, where we had phones that you actually had the rotary dial and that there was no Instagram and you actually had to write a letter to grandma, we can do that too.
I hear you, my friend. That's good. That's good. I always like to end on an upbeat, so I like that.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Anika Madden, what's new in your world?
Ooh, all kinds of stuff.
Can you give us one little tidbit?
Well, I can't blow it for North Carolina A&T. We're about to have our big campaign celebration video, so that's why I'm working around the clock.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yep.
Blow it, celebration. So that sounds like some good news.
Huge news. So that's exciting.
Well, the way donors keep dropping 7-figure gifts and 8-figure gifts your way.
Right? Yeah. So
things are good there.
We're gonna make a big old announcement, but I tell you, it's fun doing the little production stuff, but it's a lot of work.
I know you've been under it lately.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Well, Jalen's car was parked in the driveway when I pulled up, but I don't see him, so he's home somewhere.
Oh, you haven't seen him yet. How often does he come back from Atlanta?
Recently, not that much, because he's studying and taking tests every other day. So, so I'm gonna see him in a few minutes. So that's awesome news.
That's great news. That is great news. Good for you.
Some other little things here and there, but same old.
Well, hopefully I'll be okay. I have rotator cuff surgery on Monday.
Oh God, I don't even know what that is, but it sounds rough. What is that?
Yeah, like my shoulder has been killing me, So I went in there and then they did little x-rays, nothing, MRI, torn rotator cuff. You hear that from like tennis players and pitchers a lot.
What you been doing over there, Mark? Extracurricular?
No. I don't know what I'm doing. Body just falling apart as I get older.
Oh, Lord.
So it's just like 45-minute operation outpatient.
Yeah, okay.
So hopefully I'm good to go. Awesome. All right. Well, we are having a countdown And we're looking at the 10 schools, universities, colleges that have the most CEOs in terms of where they went for undergraduate. And 8 schools are tied at number 10. Those schools are Yale and New Haven, Illinois and Champaign, Bucknell and Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, UT Austin, Austin, Texas, and Dave's undergrad alma mater, Princeton University, coming in tied. All those ones all have 5 so far. So 3 more to go. 4 schools are tied with 6.
Oh, Lord.
So that's next. But let's first get through these 8 that are tied with 5. Next thing you know, we'll be doing every college in the country.
Good gracious, right?
Awesome. So, Nika, we are in the big 163 chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a kind of enticing little tease chapter title here. How can you save $100,000 on the cost of college compared to most people? You've read the chapter. What were your takeaways?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's all about how long it's going to take these kids to graduate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like, I think what it's saying is that the average number of years is 6 years for a kid to graduate from college. Is that right?
Well, first of all, the stats are kind of dismal when you just look at college graduation statistics in general.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of a depressing topic, really.
Yeah, and you know what? I just realized that starting at A&T when I started hearing all that language. And I'm like, darn, I didn't realize it's that less amount of kids graduating on time. Or least amount of kids.
So, you hear everyone say college degree is the best investment, and it is if you get that degree.
Right.
And of course you still need to utilize it, There's no guarantee you're going to utilize it. But if you don't get that degree, that's what really, really creates the pain. Student loans without an ability to pay them back. So let's just look at some of the national data and then kind of break this down and see what it actually means. So when you look at statistics, the 6-year graduation rate for public institutions is 59%. That's the 6-year rate, average, of course.
That's crazy.
The 6-year graduation rate for private nonprofit is 66%, and it's 23% for for-profit.
No, that was rough. Good gracious.
Less than 1 in 4. So here's how you come up with the $100,000 savings. This is very conservative. So student A takes 6 years to graduate, and they're paying $20,000 to go to college. So 6 times 20 is $120,000. So they paid $120,000 for their 6 years, just simply 6 times 20. Okay, student B takes 4 years to graduate, and they also paid $20,000 to go to college. So 20 times 4 is $80,000. So the difference between student A and student B, 120 minus 80 is $40,000. So you say, wait a minute. I thought you said talk about saving $100,000. That sounds like you're talking about saving $40,000. But what about opportunity cost, which is a business concept? I'll read the definition. Economists have a term they call opportunity cost. Here is how Investopedia defines opportunity cost. Opportunity cost refers to a benefit that a person could have received, but they gave it up in order to take another course of action. So what is that in this context? Well, the person that went 6 years, they lost 2 years of income. Follow me?
Yep.
The student so when you're really calculating savings, you have to not only look at the difference between the 120 and the 80, which was 40, but you have to look at what money would the student that went 4 years be making in the workforce. And I was super conservative here because I just said, let's assume they make $30,000 a year for the first 2 years. And that's how I got that $100,000. So $30,000 earnings year 1, $30,000 earnings year 2, and then they saved $40,000 by graduating in 4 years instead of 6.
Wow. So
that's how I came up with the 100. But that is so conservative. Guess what the average college graduate makes coming out, Anika? What do you think?
30-something-ish.
51.
Oh, okay.
That's according to NerdWallet. So let's just call it 50 for simplicity's sakes. So that would be 50,000 in earnings year 1, 50,000 earnings in year 2, plus the 40,000 saved. That's 140,000 savings by graduating 4 years and not 6. Now, the average engineering computer science major, it's high 60s or close to 70. So let's just call it 70. 70 plus 70, 140 plus 40, that's $180,000 saved. Now, of course, we know that these incomes, they vary a lot based on, you work in the Bay Area, Manhattan, expenses places, Seattle. Usually the salary is a lot more to adjust for the, the cost of living, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, when you're looking at the cost of college, you got to look at, can I do this thing in 4 years and not in 6? And that's overlooked. And this is actually one of the biggest things that private schools do to push back against public schools. Because public schools will often say, you guys are so expensive. You're $60,000, you're $70,000. You can come over here and go for 20 or 30. And private will often push back and say, yeah, well, look at your graduates. It takes 6 years to get out, and you still only graduate in 59%.
Wow.
Now, just because a school is private, it doesn't mean it has a higher graduation rate than a public, right? There's privates that have lower graduation rates than public. But on average, private nonprofit has a higher graduation rate.
Okay.
So what are your takeaways?
Get those babies out of there in 4 years for sure. And I guess really, like you said, it's overlooked. Like you don't think about it. You just go, it's all about getting in. It's like, oh God, I got to get started, got to get in. And then just really, I guess, understanding what those causes are. Like what causes these kids not to graduate in 4 years? Is that conversation that we need to have as a family?
Yeah, definitely. And, and there's a lot of different reasons. So I don't know if you remember a long time ago, you and I, we did a podcast on transfer students, which are around 35% of students transfer. And on average, they take an extra 27 credits to graduate. There's a full year lost right there just by transfer.
Right.
Then there's students that just keep switching majors and then have to fulfill more and more requirements. So that's a big problem. There's another problem is, and this, I really wish this would change, but taking 12 credit hours in a semester system is considered a full-time student when normally you need to average 15 to graduate on time.
Right.
So you take 12, maybe one semester you take 6 or whatever, so not taking enough credits. There's a lot. Now, obviously, not everybody's in a situation where they can just go full-time either, right? So we're kind of working off an assumption that this is a full-time student. I mean, this doesn't really apply to the non-traditional student that's working full-time, taking a couple of part-time courses. And, that's not really, who we're referring to here. But I don't see people looking at this when they're looking at the cost of college. Not like they should. I see them looking at what does the 8 awards they have to pay this year?
Right.
And not the big picture. Oh, by the way, another major reason why students don't graduate on time, besides the fact that a lot of times students aren't mature and ready to go off to college and have the maturity to handle the party scene and block out the distractions without bombing a couple classes. That's another reason as well. But another reason is difficulty getting classes. And that's particularly true at certain schools. Like you need a class to graduate, and that class, if you didn't sign up right away, you missed it. Now you got to wait a whole semester. And
is that common at like big and small schools, or is that just
more common at big public?
Okay. And
more common at schools that have funding issues. Because that's really, if you think about it, that's like completely, that's an insufferable problem. That's just completely unjustifiable, right? That should not happen. And so that speaks to you having like some logistical bureaucratic things going on. But it's very, very common at both regional publics and sometimes even flagships.
Okay.
So, put a 4-year plan together. And by the way, if you're one of those students that is able to do well in dual enrollment or AP or IB, come in with some college credits. That's a great way to to be able to make sure you get out in 4. I mean, both my kids got out in 4, and I guess in Karen's case, she just did 4 years, but, Joy came in with 20 credit hours. So she still, she could have graduated early, but she wanted to graduate with her class.
Right.
Any other takeaways, Anika?
Nope. I think we hopefully made it loud and clear.
Awesome. All right. Let's do our question from the listener. It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Okay, let's see. This week's question is from Alison in Texas. And her question is, how much does the letter of continued interest actually help, and in what ways? She says she got waitlisted at her ED2 school and stressed about writing one because she hasn't had any accomplishments to update them about.
Okay, friends, time for me to eat a big, huge portion of humble pie. I was editing the question from a listener for this podcast that you're about to hear. And right away, I realized I made a faux pas, a rookie mistake throughout my entire answer to Alison. And I made it so often I just couldn't go back and edit it every place. Technically, Alison was not waitlisted from her ED2 round of school. When you apply ED, you can be admitted, denied, or deferred, but not waitlisted. I missed the opportunity to correct the use of the word waitlist, and I constantly use the term waitlist when I should have used the term deferred. So this begs the question, how is a deferral different from a waitlist, and how are they similar? They're very similar. In both cases, a student is an acceptable applicant, but not a priority applicant. In both cases, the student was not seen as desirable as the students admitted ahead of them. In both cases, there is something there that makes the admission officer and team, we read the file, not want to deny or deep six the applicant because in both instances, waitlist or deferred serve as insurance policies in case the college doesn't get their yield. In both cases, it involves the student being put on hold and having to wait. You may be thinking, how are they different? They sound virtually the same to me. Here's the difference. When a student's deferred, the college/university may want to compare you to applicants in the regular round because they haven't had a chance to read all of the files that will come in later in the regular admission round. They may also want to see another semester worth of grades. For waitlist, there is no other group of applicants that they haven't read yet, and they often have already seen the first semester of senior year grades. As someone who was deferred, you don't know if it was because they wanted to see another set of grades. You don't know if the admission counselors wanted to see how strong the regular pool was when they read it, or whether they just want you as a backup in case they don't get their yield in whatever bucket they put you in. Sorry I never caught this. I should have corrected Alison's question and used the word deferral from the beginning. You'll hear me consistently refer to waitlist, and I should have said deferral in the ensuing conversation. The good news is it doesn't change the advice I'm about to give, but it is more than semantics. Waitlists are like first cousins to deferrals. They're not the same thing. By the way, you'll hear me muse over how many schools offer ED2. I got curious after we finished the recording and looked it up, and there are 74 schools as of now that offer ED2. This will make a lot more sense as you listen to the rest of the segment. All right, so there's a lot in there. Let's go over all of it because depending on how, conversing you are in the college process, some of that stuff might have gone over people's heads. Mm-hmm. So first of all, let's just say what ED2 is. ED2 stands for Early Decision 2. And there's around 50 schools that offer Early Decision 2. It's not a really long list. It's definitely under 100. Could be off on that number. Could be 70, but I don't think it's that high. And this is a round where if you apply, in January, it's usually January 1st, January 15th deadline, or sometimes January 7th, January 10th, usually in that range. Then you'll hear back earlier than students that apply regular. So you'll typically hear back at the start of February or mid-February. So early deadline, early notification date, but it's binding, you have to go. So she applied ED2. It's just a second round of early decision. So that's the first thing, okay? And then she got waitlisted. So we know when you get waitlisted, it can mean different things. We've talked about this before. Is it a genuine waitlist? Is it what we call a courtesy waitlist? But let's just keep it simple. Insurance is basically an insurance policy for the college that if they don't get the yield from the kids that they admitted, they're not stuck. They're not like, you're an acceptable applicant that's perfectly admissible. This is the standard definition, right? And if they need you because whatever institutional priority they have isn't met, and that could be a lot of things. It could be that, you were a nursing major and boy, they thought they'd get all these nursing majors that would enroll and they didn't enroll. So now they're looking back and saying, look at our nursing majors. Or it could be, ninth grade girls, or it could be students from Ohio. It could be lots of different things. And they don't end up getting the students they thought they would get. So then they end up going to you. Now, she's talking about a letter of continued interest. So when you're waitlisted, there's generally a couple of things that you're going to want to do. You're going to want to send an updating the school on any new accomplishments at all that you have had. And sometimes you may not have had a lot, right? Especially in the pandemic era. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you might share something you've got coming up. Like, I'm doing this incredible, exciting spring project. I'm really excited about it. Or these are my plans over the summer even. Like anything to show passion, interest is good to come up with something. I mean, I don't want you to come up with something if you literally have nothing. So that's one thing you're doing is updating current grades, updating any projects, anything going on. But then this is very, very, very important. It's like your love letter to the school. It's like, this is your chance to write another little mini why us. I like to keep this whole thing to 2/3 of a page, no longer, because people are busy.
Mm-hmm.
And you reaffirm why you're really interested in the school. For ED students, I strongly recommend, if you're still committed to that school, meaning you're willing to make a binding commitment, you let them know, I will go if you admit me. That can really carry a lot of weight, because a lot of times schools will not necessarily assume just because you applied ED that you're going to come now, because they know that some students feel slighted, like, gee, we never admitted them. They might be like, bump you. You never gave me the love. I'm moving on. So reaffirming that you will come if admitted can be extremely powerful when they're reading to applicants.
Wait, but is that really binding, though, just by you saying that? Because you might say that. It might change your mind later.
Correct. So it's not binding. Like, they can't throw you in jail if you don't go.
Right.
Right? But generally speaking, if you've applied ED, remember when you apply ED, you have to sign, college counselors have to sign, parents have to sign, everybody has to sign that you're committed. So if you reaffirm that, later, chances are they're going to believe you, because you already proved that you're willing to make that commitment the first time.
Okay.
So all of those things are the best you can possibly do. Now, the thing about Alison's question is, read it again, Anika.
Well, she basically says she's stressing because she doesn't have any accomplishments to update them about. Like, she wants to wow them with something.
Right. So, but remember, the letter of continued interest is two things. It's updates and it's a reaffirmation of your commitment to the school.
Okay.
Okay. And so, like I said, if you don't have anything to wow them, you don't have anything. You can't just pull, a rabbit out of a hat if you don't have it. You don't have it, you don't have it. But another part of her question was, how much does it help? Does it really help? She's trying to get a sense of how helpful is this letter of continued interest. So here's the reality. Every school is very different when it comes to their policies around waitlists. When you're looking at certain schools like a Williams and a Columbia, schools like that, they don't waitlist that often. So if they waitlisted, you are really, really close compared to a place like a Harvard that literally waitlisted like 80% of their their early action, not early decision, but they literally waitlisted like 80% of their applicants. So if you're trying to get a sense of how much it helps, it's your best shot that you possibly can do, and it's all you can do. Of course, what you really need to do is emotionally move on as well. I know it's hard to do, to like have one hand in the kitty while you move on with your heart somewhere else. Try to get the statistics from the school, and this is not inappropriate to ask them. Based on last year, how many people did you waitlist and how many people did you admit from your waitlist? I love it when schools disclose that. Like this year, UNC Chapel Hill said less than 1% of people that they waitlisted, they took. Less than 1%. It was like 0.8. And Duke said like 5%. Those are a couple that I know that put it out this year. So realistically, if your chances are that low, honestly, unrealistically, you kind of need to emotionally move on. I mean, just to reaffirm that you're likely to come and give them an update is highly unlikely that that's going to change the game. Just look at the stats. But then there's other schools that might take 30 to 40%. So definitely get those stats. Do everything you can. If, now some people can't handle that. They can't, they obsess. And I'm talking to them and they're obsessing. And I'm like, look, I don't want to throw my heart in here if it's not going to happen. If you are unable to do that, then you might just need to move on. Yeah, that's an individual, circumstance on an individual basis. Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. All right. I feel like I'm talking a lot, Anika. What questions do you have for me?
No, I think you got, well, I just want to make sure, because the way I read her question is, should I write something if I don't have an accomplishment? But I think I heard you say that it's value in just expressing your genuine interest, period. And then if you have an accomplishment, of course, include that.
Yeah, I'm going to read it again. Hi, Mark, Anika, and everyone else on the team. I hope you're having a good day. My name is Alison. I live in Texas. My question is, how much does the letter of continued interest actually help? So that's her question. Does it make a difference? And in what ways does it help? So she wants to know, how much does it help and in what ways does it help? It helps because colleges are incredibly interested in admitting people who are going to come, not just giving you a trophy or a notch on your belt. So when you reaffirm your interest, and now they're trying to think, if you legitimately are some, if they do have to go to their wait list, and you're legitimately an institutional priority that meets a need for them, and they're looking, okay, you're going to come, and I don't know if this person's going to come, that often will be the difference between who gets off the wait list and who doesn't. So it's tricky because I can't give you an answer like, you know what? It's going to help 50% of the time you're going to be successful. It's going to help 25. I can't do that. There's nobody who can do that because it depends on how many people did they wait list. Do they need you specifically? You know, some people think wait lists work the way they do like at charter schools. Like you're number 3 on the list, you're number 8, and they just go right down the list, 1, 2, 3. That's not how these things work.
Okay.
And that has nothing to do with what order there's no order, no list like that. And that's how some people are used to like wait lists working. Like you go to a restaurant and they say, oh, you're table 5, here's the little buzzer, we'll buzz you, you're number 5. It doesn't work like that.
Okay.
They'll go to their wait list if whatever bucket, and remember, schools that do early decision do holistic admissions. Schools that do holistic admissions do social engineering, meaning they've got everybody put in some kind of category or bucket. So you're in some kind of bucket as to some need that you're meeting for them. And they'll go to their wait list if the bucket that they have you in becomes a need. And if the bucket that they have you in, like let's say they have you in the bucket of, freshman residential girl. So you're in the residential first years from Portland. Okay. So, they want to have a certain number of kids from that state. If they have a need there, or maybe your major, or it could be other things as well. Whatever bucket they have you in, if that need emerges, that's only time they're really going to reach out to you. If there's not a need in whatever bucket you're in, then your letter of continued interest really is not going to make a difference. But because you don't know that, it's best off doing it if you genuinely are still interested in the school. And so she says, and I'm a little stressed about writing one because I haven't had any accomplishment to update them. So my response would be, can you handle keeping one foot, in this pond without becoming so emotionally obsessed that you're not free to love somebody else? And if you're not, then we need to have a conversation about whether you even want to do it. Because depending on the school, a lot of times the statistics are quite low. I hate to say this because I don't want to be negative, but a lot of times the statistics can be quite low for getting off a wait list when you're waitlisted in the early decision round.
Okay.
You got that look over there like, I got to get to work. Let's get this podcast over. I got to get my report done.
You did not have
I know you, 4th year. I can read your mind. That's why you're laughing, because you're busted. Meanwhile, I'm trying not to contort because, because like all of a sudden I'm normal, and then all of a sudden I move in the direction. I'm like, ow, my shoulder. I get this surgery. I haven't had surgery in like over 15 years, but I'll be in and out, and they say it's a one-day thing. So hopefully I'll be back to my normal self. So I can't even lie on it, Anika. You turning your left side and it's, ow!
You'll be fine.
I know. I just want to get it over with.
I know,
I said, give me the soonest date possible.
All right.
All right, Alison, stay positive. Just remember that, there's so many schools out there, and I know this is obviously a school you like. You wouldn't apply DD2 to it. But there's not just one school that can make you happy. There's not just one school that can help you achieve your dreams. I am for doing this. I'm absolutely for doing the reaffirmation of interest, but I'm also for you falling in love with other schools on your list so that you'll be just as happy with some other schools. And that's what I would try to emphasize to you right there.
Sounds like a plan.
Sounds like a plan. All right. See you next week, Anika.
See y'all. And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
Okay, friends. So hopefully you've heard the first 3 parts of what is one of my favorite interviews that I've done with Julia Esquivel. And we really get into it in part 4. So Julia starts by talking about the most rewarding parts of being a college counselor. And then she talks about the hardest parts of the job. And then Julia and I have a real heart-to-heart conversation about some of the actual hardest parts for both of us. And we sort of feed off each other as we share stories. And I asked Julia how she handles one of the hardest questions that I get as a college counselor. Listen and enjoy. So, Julia, what are the most rewarding parts about being a college counselor?
It is nice to stick with a kid instead of meeting them a couple times. Maybe they don't like being stuck with me, but I like having them at least for a year and a half and getting to know them. And so some of the more rewarding things are those, spy missions I go on. Like, I like watching them in their natural habitat. Like, it is fun to see what are they like at the school carnival, or fun to see them on the ice or something like that. But all of them have very unique and rich lives, and it's so fun as time goes on. Especially when I first meet a student, I get a cursory look at them, and by the time they graduate, I am mostly crying when they graduate a year and a half later, because we've gotten to know each other really well. I might have seen you at some of your worst times, and I might have seen you at some of your best times, but I'm here for it. Jess Lord used to jokingly call me a kid magnet, but that's because I just love hearing their stories and watching them grow. So I think that's the most rewarding part, and I feel lucky that a lot of the students, especially I think we do a good job at Milton about being a community, and so the students invest in the relationships with adults. And just yesterday I Zoomed with a student who graduated 4 years ago, things like that. So I still keep in touch with them, and it's nice to be able to do that. Whereas when I was in admissions, I would totally love students that I met, but had to kind of keep them at an arm's length, because I'm like, I don't know if I can admit you at the end of the day. So it's nice sticking with them and watching them grow, because there's a huge difference from second semester juniors to graduating seniors. They grow up a lot in that time, and it's an honor to kind of watch them grow and discover who they are, and then sort of move on to their next step in life.
And friends, Julia's mentioned Jess Lord a couple times. He's the Dean of Admissions at Haverford, and he'll be coming on later in 2021 for an interview. In fact, we've already had a couple of pre-meetings about it, and we kind of all set on the topic. And I'll tell you guys the topic. He's going to talk about bias in admissions, and what they're trying to do to identify their unconscious biases and prevent that from hindering the students and, making the absolute best possible decisions they can. So you'll be hearing from Jess a little bit later in the year. I've known Jess for either 19 or 20 years. I first met Jess. He was either at Brown or Pomona when I first met him. So, that was a while ago, Julia. He used to be the Pomona rep that would come do information sessions at Westtown. And I think he's been at Haverford now 16 or 17 years.
I gotta think so. Yeah.
So that's Jess. I know Julia's referred to him. I guess he would have been your boss for the 4 years you were at Haverford College, but a great guy. And I know you guys will look forward to that interview. So let's talk about the most difficult parts of being a college counselor. What's really hard about it?
Yep.
You already said earlier, remember you said you thought they had the cushy job?
Yeah.
So we know that the honeymoon's over on that one. So now you're in the real thick of it.
I will have to echo what you had said earlier, Mark, where I think the most difficult part is when that strong relationship is eroded at two different parts in our process. It's usually when I give the predictions of admission at schools. So that's when we rate at Milton, we do a reach, we do a possible, and we do a likely. We are actually changing this for next year for this exact purpose because of the difficulties it's created and the fractures that it creates in the counseling relationship.
How are you changing it?
Yes, so we are finding that it is very, no matter how we try to state it, that we actually have a long narrative right before we give a student a list with their ratings of likely, reach, possible. We also have an unlikely category. We are finding two things. One is that no matter how long our narrative is about that, we will support your application no matter where it goes. We are happy to do that for you. This has nothing to do with how highly we think of you, what we think your worth is. Again, I'm going to quote Just Lord, who always said, admission is not about just desserts. It is not a meritocracy. It does not mean if you did everything right that you're going to get into places. And that's a harsh reality and hard for especially adolescents to understand. So every time I tell a student that their dream school is unlikely or reach, they automatically go to the place of, oh gosh, Ms. Esquivel does not support me or does not think I'm good enough to go to Harvard. And that takes on an even deeper and more upsetting sort of form when it comes to students who are maybe underrepresented in different colleges. So that means a lot more to a first generation student or a BIPOC student or a low income student. So, someone who's been told all their life, like, this place is not welcoming for you. And then I say, I affirm that with an unlikely or reach rating. It's not okay. So we've thought really critically about changing that for that reason. But that's probably my least favorite part of this process is I actually will hide sometimes after the list goes out to parents and to pretend like it didn't happen. Because and some kids get it, and I don't blame them. My mom is an immigrant. She came to this country and was always very serious about education, and I could understand that if somebody said to me like, Julia, you're never gonna get into Harvard, that it could feel like, okay, so then what was all our hard work for, and whatnot. So I think that's the worst part for me and the most difficult is that it's essentially, as a joke, the kids sometimes call us dream crushers, right? And even if that's not what we're doing, that's what it feels like to them. We talk a lot about managing intent and impact, right? We do this all the time. And it doesn't matter that my intentions are not personal. I'm just telling you, by the numbers, when Stanford admits less than 2%, that means you don't have a good shot at getting into this college. It doesn't have anything to do with you. It's the numbers. But what they hear is the impact, which is I don't support you, or I don't, feel that you're strong enough and whatnot. So to me, that's probably the most difficult part. And then when they do get their rejections, and right now it's rejection season, and then we'll go through this round again in March. Other times I kind of like to hide from my email for at least 12 hours or whatnot. But that's difficult is when it is very hard to counsel a student through rejection from their dream school, particularly if maybe it was an unlikely school. And it's hard. There are sometimes I can't explain it. I really can't. And I just have to sit there and listen. And I am of no help when a student and I can't rationalize why a student wasn't admitted. And it stings a lot. And I sometimes regret not getting a master's in social work instead of a master's in public health. Because I just, there's not a lot of tools out there that help students manage their mental health through this process.
Yeah, that's really hard. So our regular listeners know Dr. Lisa Ruff has joined my counseling team, and we co-counseled together like dozens of kids in 2020. And I was having a conversation with her, after 30 or 40 kids we'd co-counseled together, and I said, what have you learned? And she's like, I've learned that you have to dash dream sometimes in this work, and That's really, really hard. And I tend to be the straightforward type, working on that. As someone said to me back in grad school, you got to learn to put some velvet on your bricks. And that's just so challenging because I like it straight myself. Like, that's my style. I like it straight. And so I tend to think other people like it straight. And I tend to think, look, once the news comes, it's going to be even harder. So we want to at least kind of sort of prepare you for what looks like, is based on stats and past experience likely to happen. And the kids just don't have the sense of the 43,000 high schools out there and the international competition and recruited athletes. It's just really, really hard when you're in your own echo chamber to know how competitive it actually is out there for a school that's going to, maybe take 1,000 or 2,000 kids, and there's 43,000 high schools just in this country alone. But talking numbers doesn't get to that emotional level.
Right. I will say almost always a student might return 2 years later after graduating and fess up on some sense, like, oh gosh, well, wow, I really wasn't listening when you were saying that, how you felt and whatnot. And especially now that they see the other students they go to school with, it's funny when they get to some of these colleges, they'll be like, how did that person get in? And then they start to realize, like, oh gosh, the admissions process is not a perfect metric for the strength of a student whatsoever. So eventually they'll come around, but those 18 months together where they're not always hearing great news from me is difficult.
Yeah, and my view is if you're obsessing over your A option, you could miss out on a really good B option that could be fantastic and you could grow to love. And then you end up with a C or D option because you never even put the effort into what was a good B plan. And so I think the majority of the time people come around to understand you're just trying to help them in most instances. I co-counsel with another boarding school counselor at a different school in Pennsylvania, and she doesn't go anywhere near this stuff, especially all of the social media stuff that broke out at a lot of different schools where people are talking about the racial issues that they had.
Yeah.
And she's like, she's a Caucasian female, and she's like, I'm not even going anywhere near that, especially with a student of color.
Right.
Because the last thing in the world I want them to think is this white lady didn't believe in you. So she actually likes partnering with me because she says, you know what, you'll tell them what I wish I could tell them. And I'm just not even going to I'm not even going to go there because I can't afford to have them think that I didn't believe in them.
Right.
And so we kind of work well together. I don't relish it, but it's not necessarily, fun. But, the way I look at it is, if I'm the doctor and I have to tell the patient they had cancer, that's not fun. They don't like that.
Right.
But I have to look at it like, but I can also say we caught it in time that you're going to live. And so, I'm actually helping you, and I have to be able to take joy in that. Otherwise, the job wouldn't be fun because I would say 80% of the time people come to me with unrealistic lists that are top heavy. Yep. And they're they don't have the proper ability to put themselves into perspective in the national or the international pool or up against all of the hooked applicants that they're up against. And so this is not like one of those things that happens every now and then. This happens like the majority of the time in my experience. I don't know if that you'd agree, Julia.
Yeah, hard same on that one. I'm going to go with maybe like 90, 95%.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 80 is probably really low, isn't it?
Yeah. I had to convince a student who loved this program at Syracuse, but Syracuse is kinder on the selectivity scale for our students. And so she was like, I probably shouldn't apply early decision because it's a possible range. I was like, no, please. You're our example of which others should live by. So
let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, our recommended resource for episode 163 is one I'm excited about. It is a website, and the website is highereddive, DIVE.com. What is Higher Ed Dive? Well, Higher Ed Dive's a daily dive into the higher ed news that's out there. It's digestible news stories, and you'll get a story sent to you Monday through Friday from their team of independent journalists right into your inbox if you sign up. And it's all free original content. Then on the weekend, you'll get bonus content. So to me, this is similar to like an Inside Higher Ed or Chronicles of Higher Ed, but all for free, and definitely a must for college counselors and for parents who really want to know what's going on. So for example, if you go to current issue of highereddive.com, there's an article on as Pell Grants open up for incarcerated students, programs get ready for growth. There's an article on the new lawsuits that could change higher ed. There's an article that talks about tracking how coronavirus is impacting colleges. And there's an article on more and more colleges returning to in-person instruction in the fall. Those are just a few of the current articles in the current edition. So once again, just go to highereddive.com, sign up, and get a daily email with the current stories in the news impacting higher education sent right to your inbox, and all for free. Now return to my interview with Julia Esquivel. So I'm going to ask a follow-up question that's related to this, and this is all. I mean, this is really harsh, and it oftentimes doesn't come out quite this way. But let's just go right in the hot seat and ask the real tough question. So, how would you handle a student that says to you, "I can't believe you're recommending all these schools to me. These schools are like safety schools to me, where low-performing kids go. Why didn't you recommend school XYZ brand name? I would be embarrassed to go to one of these colleges that you recommended." How would you handle that?
Yep. If I had a penny even for every time I heard one of those lines.
So that wasn't new. That wasn't new.
So first what I do is if they say one school, I tell them, oh, I went to that school, just so I could disrupt how sort of negative and maybe a little elitist they are being. So at Milton, we don't put any college paraphernalia up in our office. So the student actually doesn't know maybe where I went to college or what colleges we promote, quote, quote. We don't promote any, but we purposely don't put up college flyers and posters in our office because we want to disrupt that narrative of there's this subset of schools and those are the quote good schools, right?
That's good.
So after I make them feel bad about disparaging the school I didn't actually go to, but it makes them think for a second about perspective.
I have to ask you, I have to cut you in. What's their emotional reaction when you say that? Like, first of all, do they believe you? Do they have that embarrassed look like, oh no, I just threw your school under the bus?
Yes, always. I do it with parents too, and it's really fun. So since this is a podcast, I am 35, but I look really young. And so they don't, they do believe that I went to one of these schools because I think sometimes the younger you look, the less credible maybe you are in this business. I don't know.
That's funny.
So yes, they get hugely embarrassed. And they're like, oh, gosh, I'm sure it's got great, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. It does have great, all these things.
So when do you ever tell them that you didn't go there?
I will like maybe 5 minutes into the conversation.
Okay.
Sometimes I leave them hanging. I'm sure there's multiple kids around the school being like, I thought Miss Esquivel went to Central Ozarks or like, like schools that we don't have any students that might take a chance. So, but that whole exercise is to first put things into perspective for them. And so we actually have it's not exactly a college counseling curriculum at Milton, but we have what's called effective education called senior transitions. And we actually try to work on the perspective angle there, where that the colleges our students are applying to represent less than 4% of the colleges in North America. So you are not the average college going student, right? It was your choice to decide to apply to a bunch of schools that accept less than 35% of their applicants, right? And also that selectivity does not necessarily mean better. So because of where we are, it's actually what's a really helpful lesson in this is the story of Northeastern University, right? When I was growing up in Massachusetts, Northeastern was a pre-professional school where it had nowhere near the selectivity it does now. And now it's super selective and hardly any Milton students get in there. And yes, they've always had wonderful faculty and wonderful courses and programming and resources. Nothing changed drastically overnight except that 1 year in selectivity. And we also try to have students respect one another. Because of financial realities, because of the opportunity gap, there are going to be students who should be at, quote, more selective colleges, but are going to end up, I'm going to use UMass Amherst because that's our flagship public institution here, where a lot of families say, including families who are low income or first generation, like, why did I send my child to Milton if I'm just going to go to UMass, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where
Heard
other
that one
people
before.
go. But we have quite a few students that is their best option for a multiple of reasons. So we try to put in perspective in that is not necessarily for low performing students or that college is not beneath you. You could actually, UMass Lowell we use as an example. UMass Lowell has one of the best engineering programs. You might be better served in the engineering program at UMass Lowell than if you went to, I'm going to say Williams, that doesn't have a formal engineering undergraduate opportunity, right? So you have to think about the program, you have to think about affordability, you have to give yourself perspective. And then if none of that works, I just say, let's cut to the chase. And if you are just into names, fine, I will play along. But I will tell you that has not yielded happiness. It's like when people tell, even if you get rich, money does not buy you happiness. I can't tell you how many students who have come back and said maybe their B or C school that they're at, they are so happy at. I had a student who shot for was totally admissible at the most selective schools and ended up at still a very selective school, but maybe not as name brand, if you will, as the Ivies. And she is now the Pied Piper of this college. And she can't say enough good things about it and knows that also the strength of the programming there is a better fit for her than some of these Ivy League schools. So we try to keep it in perspective. But I do understand that there are other forces out there that dictate the way a student might view which college is good and which one's not. We try to disrupt those and get the student to come around to understanding it for themselves, but it doesn't work every time. And I realize too, it's also hard to manage parent expectations as well for a lot of our students, particularly culturally. A lot of the time that's just going to be a very different way of looking at things, and that I have to respect that too. Just because maybe that's not my philosophy doesn't mean I should respect the student if that's the philosophy that their family lives by.
Well said. And I might have to borrow that. I went to that school. I don't know if I can do it with a straight face. You're better thespian than me, but I really love that.
You should you write to the colleges, ask for a sweatshirt, ask for a mug, something, just display it in your office,
I have heard of students who are so tired of being bombarded by where are you applying, that they just sort of answer with the local community college, and they just love the reaction it has on everybody's face, and they do that. So I've heard students do that before. It's kind of an interesting way of just deflating that whole situation.
Yep.
Now it's time for our college spotlight of the week. All right, for now, we are all in on Northeastern. And Dave, if I had to pick one school that has improved and changed its reputation the most in the 21 years I've been doing this, Northeastern would get my vote.
Wow.
This 73-acre campus located in the heart of Boston, Northeastern is a large private university that is classified as an R1 university, which is the highest level of scholarly research. Even though Northeastern has no definitive natural boundaries as a campus, it's one that just bleeds right into the city. The campus does have ample green spaces interspersed with brick walkways, outdoor art, and sculptures. Founded in 1898 as the Evening Institute for Young Men at a local YMCA, and it continued to serve the YMCA for several decades afterward. Now, like the flagship school for Connecticut, they share the same nickname. You know what that is, Dave? Hint, same as Connecticut.
Bulldogs?
No, that's Georgia.
Oh, shoot. Okay, Connecticut. All right. Don't know.
The Huskies.
Oh, yes.
The Huskies.
Yes.
And their colors are red and black, and their mascot are the Paws. The Paws.
Okay, this is all cool stuff. This is the first one that actually rivals the Hokie bird for me.
You won't forget the Hokie bird.
Right.
Just like you won't forget Hawaii Pacific or London Metropolitan. They're like our first spotlights, and I think they're still your favorites.
Oh, absolutely, man. I'm all in on Hawaii. Okay, the Huskies.
Yes. Now, Northeastern offers undergraduate and graduate programs on its main campus in Boston, but what's also cool is they have a number of regional campuses, including one in Seattle, Washington, one in Charlotte, North Carolina, one in San Jose, California, one in San Francisco, California, one in Toronto, one in Vancouver, one in Portland, Maine. And in 2019, Northeastern purchased the new College of Humanities in London, England. I'll say a little bit more about that later.
Wow.
We're going to focus mostly, though, on the main campus moving forward, which, of course, is in the heart of Boston. And the urban setting of Northeastern puts students literally in walking distance of places like Fenway Park, Symphony Hall, the Museum of Fine Arts, as well as shopping centers, nightclubs, and cafes, and in some cases, free access to attend some of those things, which is really nice. Now, what's really put Northeastern on the map is its co-op program. And co-op, which is short for cooperative education. Founded in 1909, Northeastern's co-op program is the second oldest in the country. Only Cincinnati, which we also did a spotlight on, has an older co-op. Next week, Georgia Tech, fourth oldest. So we're mentioning a lot of the original co-ops here, 1, 2, and 4. So co-op, what is it? I'm going to do a deep dive on co-op, much deeper than I've done before, going over the pros and the cons of co-op. But before we get into that, let's just do a basic description. So what co-op does is it integrates classroom study with professional full-time work experience, usually in 6-month stints at Northeastern, although occasionally 4-month stints, especially business students that tend to have more 4-month ones there. Northeastern has over 3,100 work partners in all 7 continents, including Antarctica.
Wow.
They have work partners in 75 countries. And the program has been a key part of Northeastern's curriculum and experiential learning now for over 100 years. And it is one of the largest co-op programs in the world. It isn't actually required for all academic disciplines to be in the co-op. Some majors like business require it, but it's why people go to Northeastern. So guess what percentage of Northeastern students, Dave, participate in co-op?
3,100
percentage, my friend.
I know. I'm just saying.
Oh, okay.
It's got to be 90%, especially when you have Seattle, Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm choosing the one in London. I'm going to say it's
London.
High.
I know,
Yeah,
man. You like
90%.
97%.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah. All right. So let's like I said, do a deep dive into the pros and the cons of co-op. And I'm going to share a lot of I'm going to share about 10 pros and a good half dozen or more cons as well. And so see if co-op's for you. Just let's start with the pros. First of all, you learn what life is like in the real world. I mean, you are an adult and treat it like an adult in the real world, not in school at all. Some of the business co-ops are 60 and 70 hours. You know, if you're an auditor or something like that, and you're just in the real world and you get to know what it's like to be in the real world. So you're talking about experiential education. Secondly, tremendous networking opportunity. Thirdly, unlike internships, which tend to be part-time and seldom are 6 months long, you're treated like a first-year employee. In fact, the way Northeastern structures them is they'll have 2 people that do co-ops, one for 6 months, another for the next 6 months, and their contracts with companies are, look, treat this person like a first-year employee, you know, and a lot of times that's true even for the compensation and the work responsibilities. So full immersion in the culture really lets you understand what it is like. You're going to learn a tremendous amount about yourself in that kind of environment very early on. Another advantage, you can live internationally in one of their 75 cities, or you can say, hey, I'd like to see what San Francisco's like. I'd like to see what Chicago's like. I'd like to see what Dallas is like. Maybe I might want to live there, so why don't I try it for 6 months and see if it's a place I want to live? So you get to try it out before you take a job and relocate permanently. An incredible way to confirm your interests. In fact, one of the things that often happens at Northeastern is someone does a co-op and hates it. And people think, wow, what a terrible experience. And they're like, no, what a great experience. Aren't you glad you found that out at age 20? Normally at Northeastern, you either do 2 co-ops or 3. And I'll get more into that a little bit later. Let me keep going through the pros. So another thing is you're much more employable when you graduate because you're someone who's seen as graduating with work experience, either a year normally or a year and a half. So you have an incredible competitive edge because of the fact that you are graduating with experience. And compensation, starting pay is proven to be higher. A lot of schools, it's $5,000 higher for people that co-op versus people that didn't. And you get to tell if you fit in the corporate culture before you commit to a job. And then another thing is you can make some really nice money in some instances. Now, I do need to be honest, some co-ops are unpaid at Northeastern. There are some majors that just don't lead to paid jobs, and some are low paid. But the majority are paid, and some are paid quite handsomely. For example, take a guess, Dave, what the range in hourly pay is for business majors and comp sci majors. And these are students, usually they'll co-op in the second semester of their sophomore year and then the second semester of their junior year. The way Northeastern is set up, you can either do fall co-ops or spring co-ops. So take a guess what the average pay range is for business co-op jobs and comp sci co-op jobs.
$20 to $40.
Pretty good guess. Business majors, 18 to 35 an hour. Comp sci, 35 to 50 an hour.
Wow.
Now, think about that as a 19 or 20-year-old, and then times that by 6 months, and you're making a cool $30,000 to $35,000 potentially over 6 months. Pretty good.
That's covering your nut. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Now, what do you think are the cons of co-op, Dave? What would you think would be the negatives?
It's really hard for me to. I'm going through. Okay, I listed them. Real world experience, network, international, 75 cities, confirm interest. Boy, I'm looking hard for the, let's see. A con is I'm a person who doesn't like to travel, doesn't like to get paid, and prefers to remain in my cubicle, not interacting with any business people till I get out of school. How's that?
Nice try. So they're actually, I think this is important because as I go over the cons, it really might make people realize, maybe it's not for me. So one of them is people are coming and going all the time, so you don't really have the sense of community. If you're that kind of person that really wants that sense of community, you came in with your freshman class, it's not really that way. Different people are on different schedules, where they're going, and you don't necessarily have that same sense of community that you have at a campus that doesn't have people coming and going all the time. Another con is it can really add to the competitiveness to the culture. Co-ops are not guaranteed. So what happens is you learn about co-ops through your co-op advisor and through NU Careers, which is an internal job database only for Northeastern students. You have to compete for these. You have to compete for these jobs. So when you put together a lot of very ambitious, highly motivated students, that can add a lot to the competitiveness of the culture, where everybody's striving to get the Microsofts and the Googles and the Nikes and all those kinds. They have tons and tons and tons of companies, or the consulting companies. So it can add some competitiveness to the culture that not everybody necessarily likes. Another potential con is if you come to Northeastern, you really have no idea what you want to study. Northeastern forces you to pick up something pretty quickly and get on a track because, they do have a semester as soon as you get there, which I love. Everybody has to take a co-op class, and it prepares you for the real world, which I think is amazing. It's resume writing, it's interview skills, it's hooking up your LinkedIn, it's, how to dress professionally. They have a whole class that covers everything. But then this is a very pre-professional environment. And if you're not looking for that pre-professional environment, you can pretty quickly be thrown into, that can add some angst. Like you don't necessarily know what you want to study. You're surrounded by people that know, I want to be a pharmacist, so that's where I'm going. I want to be in marketing, this is where I'm going. And so it's not necessarily the place for people that have no idea necessarily what they want to study. And then another con is it requires a lot of maturity at a really young age. I mean, think about it. You're living in an urban location. You're at a large private school on the middle of the city. Okay? We talk about how that's challenging in a place like NYU. This is on steroids because while you're in school, taking maybe 16 credit hours of challenging courses, still some students apply to as many as 50 co-ops. So you're applying to all these co-ops. You have to navigate. You might have a phone interview, a video interview, an in-person interview. Northeastern students will tell you this. Not everybody's sympathetic. Well, I have a class at 2. Sometimes you have to miss a class because your interview is when your interview is. This is a real job. Most employers work around the school schedule, but not everybody does. Then let's say you get the job. You're responsible for salary negotiations, job description negotiations. And if you stay in Boston, you can actually just live in the dorms. You don't have to worry about housing. But if you want, that's boring, right? If you want to do a co-op, live all around the world, you're responsible for figuring out all your housing. Now, that you do have a co-op advisor, but that's a lot of maturity. And not everybody's ready to handle that level of adulting at 19 or 20. And then another thing that I would say is if you want to graduate in 4 years, they've set up a nice structure for you to do that. You can actually do 2 co-ops and graduate in 4 years, but it doesn't mean you give up all your summers. So if you're the person that wants their traditional college experience, come back in the summer, hang out with your high school friends, that's not going to happen if you want to be in the 4-year plan, because the way you can do 2 co-ops and graduate in 4 years at Northeastern is to go to summer school when you're not in co-op. And then some people just don't like the idea of the 5-year plan. 3 co-ops means you're graduating in 5 years. I think this is a little nitpicky because you're coming out with a year and a half of work experience and money. So, but those are just some of the things that the detractors would say about co-op.
So can I just make a point?
Yep.
These cons are amazing pros for the tiger parents among you. They're only cons for the slacker kids.
Well, I think that's a little harsh because not everybody's mature. Not everybody's that mature.
I know.
Right? Sometimes it's a maturity issue. And not everybody is as self-directed and kind of knows what they want to do. If you want to take college to take 2 to 3 years to take a whole bunch of courses and figure out what you want to do, Northeastern gets you on the treadmill really quickly. I see it as a much better match for the person who kind of knows what they want to do. Like, you may not know exactly. You may not know. You might think I may want to do business, and you might want to try something in different aspects of business. But if you're clueless, you can feel some pressure. But I agree. Most of those cons could be turned around and also be seen as pros. I see your point.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at the outcome, I mean, the opportunity to live in all these different places in the world and come out with amazing experience and get to try the culture before you end up like so many adults being 30 and figuring out, I hate my job. And now you either have to go back to school or you're stuck with a job you hate for years.
Well, absolutely. I mean, yes, you give up a sense of the college community, but you gain an international and business community. Yes, it adds to the competitiveness of the culture, but it prepares you for the competitiveness of life. It forces you to choose a track, but you're going to need to choose a track eventually. It forces you to grow up very fast. And it's hard growing up really fast, but the advantage is that you're growing up really fast.
And also, so many parents are like, look, do I want to spend $80,000 and my kid doesn't have a job? Like, job placement is ridiculous here, right? Like, it is, this is as good a way to guarantee that you have a much better chance coming out with a job here than going to the most brand name school in the world and thinking that you're automatically going to get a job because you went to brand name university.
And Mark, one of these days we're going to do a podcast on all Ivy League kids who fail to launch, the amount of Ivy League kids 2 years out of an Ivy League school living in their parents' basement. So the reality is this is forcing your child to launch. And you're right. Maybe it's not for everybody, but what a fantastic opportunity to fast track your kid into the successful lane of life.
I think Northeastern's going to be one of Dave's new favorites. I can see it coming. I knew it. I knew before I even did this. I know Dave. He's going to like this one.
Man, you make money, you're getting experience, and you're getting out of my basement. I like it.
Well, I think it's pretty cool that you could say, you know what? I'll do one in London for 6 months. Maybe I'll do one in San Francisco, and maybe I'll try Houston,
Oh, it's amazing.
And I'll do them in 3 different areas. I'll figure out where I want to live. I'll figure out what I want to do, and I'll get paid. Pretty cool.
Absolutely.
One thing I love that Northeastern does, and I have to admit, this is great. And I think part of this, motive-wise, they do feel a lot of pressure. Like, some people will say, you know what? I don't know if I want 5 years to do it. Or I don't know if I want 4 years and I in summer school all the time. So one thing they do that's great, what you find with most selective private schools, and I talked about this before. I looked at the selective schools in the South. I looked at Vanderbilt, Davidson, and Emory. What's true of all of them? They limit the amount of credits you can come in with APs and IBs. They do. But Northeastern is very flexible. They allow you to come in with up to 32 hours of AP or IB credits if you get 4s and 5s in APs or 5, 6, or 7s on higher level IBs. So that's one way that people are able to do the 4 year. If you're one of these students that bangs out high scores on APs and IBs, you literally can come in with a year of your coursework done, which can give you an incredible amount of flexibility. So that's really cool because that's not normal. Another thing that's great is their NU Path systems, which are their 8 basic competencies that they have, such as ethical reasoning, diversity, and they have required distributions for these in terms of courses you have to take, but there's so many courses that students just find they can find incredible options while fulfilling the school's requirements. Another thing that's great is the way they do study abroad. So they have all kinds of spring study abroad trips, which are great to do these, shorter study abroad spring trips. But they have this thing which I think is amazing. It's called Dialogue of Civilization. And the way this works, and they have 2 different ones. They have Summer Session 1 and Summer Session 2. So these are 5-week summer study abroad trips that you take with faculty members and people in your major. And so they're normally around 20 to 30 people in a cohort. So here you are with 20 to 30 people, sometimes less, and a couple faculty members, and you go to another country. You take courses taught by the faculty member, who obviously you're going to get to know. Several faculty members go on each one of these. And while you're not doing that, you're also traveling around the country, in some cases doing service over there, but certainly visiting the key landmarks in the country while you take a couple courses. And so that's an incredible opportunity called Dialogue of Civilization. They have 2 different options, Summer 1 and Summer 2. Now, let's talk about something I said before, which is Northeastern has been transformed as a school. So 30 years ago, Northeastern was a nondescript urban commuter school with low retention and low graduation rate. What happened? How did it change? Well, let's take a look back. 1990 was the first class they actually had more on-campus students than commuter students. And after President Kenneth Ryder retired in 89, the university made this commitment. It said, we're going to have a deliberate and a steady approach to change. And so what had been happening is Northeastern had been getting about 15 to 20,000 applications a year, and they were accepting between 50 to 75%, depending on the major. And they had a lot of attrition and a low graduation rate. 25% of freshmen were dropping out. The graduation rate was below 50. In fact, it got as low as 40% for the people that came in 1984 and came out in 1989. And then President Richard Freeland decided in the early 90s that if Northeastern reduced its class size from about 4,500 students to 2,800 students, became a lot more selective, they put $500 million into construction, including academic buildings, research facilities, bunch of residence halls, athletic centers, and increased faculty pay. And then between 95 to 2007, their average SAT scores increased by over 200 points. Retention rates rose dramatically. Applications doubled. Then they invested $75 million into an academic investment plan. They concentrated on undergrad education and their Center for Research Excellence. And they did a number of things. Faculty originally were bolstered by over 100 new tenured track faculty, which then later expanded to 300 new tenured track faculty in different interdisciplinary fields. And then just continued with other presidents. President Aon, he put more and more emphasis on improving community relations by reaching out to people in the neighborhood. And this once commuter school now requires students to live on campus for the first 2 years. It guarantees housing for all 4 years. And you'll hear a lot of criticism because President Freeland, he set the goal. We're going to be in the top 100 in U.S. News rankings. A lot of people criticize him for that. But they made so many upgrades in transforming the school that they accomplished that goal in 2005. And then since then, they've cracked the top 30 in the national rankings multiple times. But what did they do? Number of strategic moves that they did. First of all, cities got really hot. People wanted to be in cities. And then after the global financial crisis, 07, 09, co-op just became incredibly popular because people said, if I'm sending my kid away and spending all this money, I want you coming out with a job. And co-op seems like the best way to guarantee it. So this Northeastern, this large now highly residential campus. Most students choose to live on campus. Upperclassmen have the option. And in 2020 and 21, Northeastern committed $355 million in grant and scholarship money. And the 6-year graduation rate in 2019, Dave, 89%.
Wow. Awesome.
And not only that, Northeastern is now one of the top 10 most applied to colleges in the country. So it went from a school getting 15 to 20,000 applications to a school getting 60 to 65,000 applications now.
You know, when I went to business school, they always had these case studies on amazing transformations. I wonder how many business schools are using Northeastern as a case study on how to be successful. We talk so much about this challenging college environment. You literally have a situation where a school went from the bottom quartile to the upper 10, 20% of schools through a variety of phenomenal innovations over time. This should be a case study for everyone.
Yeah, more than upper 10 or 20%, Dave. I think there's 2,300 four-year accredited schools out there. I mean, this is the top 2%.
Well, I'm sure you'll talk about how competitive it is.
Yeah, it's quite competitive.
So what a case study. But we'll talk some more. Go ahead.
Yeah, but you're right. It makes for a great case study. So let's talk about the sports teams. There's not a lot to talk about. Okay, I could probably summarize it there. The Northeastern Huskies, they do compete as a Division I in the Colonial Athletic League with 18 varsity sports. However, these Huskies cannot be confused with the Yukon Huskies that bring the heat and bring the fanfare. Or last week when I talked about the Utah Muss, the mighty Utah student section. No. This is not a lot of school spirit here. People moving around, going to co-op, doing their jobs there. The sports thing, for example, no football team, little fanfare when it comes to school spirit. Guess what the big sport is, Dave, at Northeastern? Unquestionably number one.
Crew?
Hockey.
Oh, hockey. Yeah, yeah.
Women's hockey has won 16 championships. Men's hockey won the championship in 18, 19, and 20. Hockey's actually in its own league, the Hockey East Association. And the big fanfare around sports is what's called the Beanpot Hockey Tournament, where Northeastern goes against rivals Boston College, Boston University, and Harvard. So that's the big thing. Who's going to win the Beanpot? And you know that you're not a sports power if you're talking about winning the Beanpot. I'm sorry, it just doesn't have that oomph to it.
Yeah, but just for comparison, the Connecticut women's Huskies would probably beat the Northeastern men Huskies in basketball.
Now, they have another exciting program called NUN, and this program is for first-year students who want to start out right away by going abroad, right out of the chute. You go abroad, take a couple courses abroad, and you start in the spring. So that's become a real popular program as schools jams with admission applicants. You can get in, but you're going to do NUN. You'll go abroad and start in the spring. Now, Northeastern is several different colleges, 7 of them actually all together. There's a College of Arts and Media and Design. There's a School of Business. There's a School of Computer Science, the College of Engineering, the College of Health Sciences, the College of Science, the College of Social Science and Humanities. And there is an Explore program for people that are undeclared or undecided and not sure what they want to do and need more academic advising. And it's a big advisor school. I mean, you get a co-op advisor, you get a major advisor, you get a minor advisor. They have advisors for everything and career placement advisors. So they're a big advisor school. And another thing they're big on are what are called combined majors. These are like cross-disciplinary majors that are in effect a double major. So you do computer science and business, or information science and cognitive psychology, communication studies and political science, international affairs and cultural anthropology. They have 195 of these combined majors. What are the strongest majors overall? There are a lot of them. Architecture, very strong. Journalism, very strong. Business and marketing. International business is really, really, really strong. They got this expat year where students spend 1 semester studying overseas at a university and then 6 months on an international co-op as part of the international business major. Health science students can pursue a 6-year doctorate in pharmacy. I have multiple students there in their nursing program, which is exceptional. Physical therapy, health administration, all strong programs. Neuroscience, very strong. Engineering, they have engineering in about 9 different areas that go all the way to the PhD level. So things like computer science, computer engineering, some other strong programs, speech pathology, quantitative economics, experimental psychology, international relations, and political science. They do have a law school that's been around for about 100 years as well. All freshmen are in a living learning community that's organized around particular interest. There's also an honors program, and freshman honor students live together. And perhaps most impressive, for all the things that Northeastern is doing, they're not resting on their laurels. They still have ambitious and really big plans. They're continuing to focus on global expansion. Let's give some examples. In late 2018, they announced the acquisition of the New College of Humanities. This is a London-based small private school, and the move was seen as a real surprise because typically schools like to build their own new campuses, but they purchased an existing one. Then in the summer of 2019, they announced they were launching a new satellite campus in Vancouver, Canada. Then in January 2020, they announced that they were opening, and I might be saying this wrong, ROUX. How would I pronounce that, Dave? Roux?
Roux. Is that in France?
Roux. So they're opening their Roux Institute in Portland, Maine. This is a new research institute, and it's focusing on artificial intelligence, machine learning, digital, and life science. And this was after David Roux gave them $100 million.
So all their students can get those little bioscan monitors.
Yeah, exactly. So they're trying to do is turn the city into a new tech hub and to spark economic growth in the region. And during the last few years, there's just been a lot of developments. They were recognized as a National Arboretum. They opened a $225 million research and lab complex known as the Interdisciplinary Science and Engineering Complex. They've launched a new Institute for Experiential Artificial Intelligence. They got a $50 million donation for that one. Renamed it after the donor, Amin Khoury, the Khoury College of Computer Science. And upcoming projects include building an EXP, another research facility, to support Northeastern's research in autonomous vehicles, drones, and humanoid robots. And that is expected to be done in 2023. Dave, what jumped off the page for you?
Too much jumped off the page. I'm just going to give a summary. What an amazing school. I mean, the bottom line is you have an amazing transformation of a school that 30 years ago was a commuter school. Most of the kids commuted. They had half the kids not graduating, and it was ranked in the bottom half of national rankings. They went on an amazing transformation. They now are in, I'm counting, Seattle, Charlotte, North Carolina, San Francisco, Toronto, Vancouver, Portland, England. They have 3,100 work partnerships in all 7 continents, 75 countries. They have the second oldest co-op system, and you have an amazing opportunity to do things that you can't do in most other schools. I mean, I think this is one of the most impressive college spotlights we've given thus far. This is a case study in a successful university. So my hat's off to Northeastern.
Yeah, there's a lot to like, especially if you like being in the city, or if you're someone that, a lot of times I work with people and they're like, look, I want strong career placement. I want a job coming out. So let me give the stats and we'll call it a day. 62,263 applications in the top 10 in the country for that. And we know that California, the UCs take up the first 6 with their 100,000 plus. 18.1% acceptance rate. So really competitive now. About 1 in 6 getting in. 18,299 undergrads, 26,186 total students, 50-50 male, female. Test scores, pretty high averages, middle 50%, evidence-based reading and writing, 670 to 750, math, 690 to 790. So 25% of kids, Dave, have over a 790 on their math.
Wow.
Median SATs now 1463.
Wow.
Middle 50% ACT, 32 to 34. 13% of students aren't getting the Pell Grant. I already said, maybe I did, 97% retention rate, meaning freshmen coming back for the second year. 23% yield. They have students from 141 countries. And I'll tell you something else you're going to love, Dave, that I never mentioned. 18% of their students are international.
Wow.
So if you like an international student body, they've got it. I mean, that's about as high the number as we've had so far. 27% of students from Massachusetts, 14% Asian American, 18% Latinx, 4% African American, 4% multicultural. Oh, and also potential for merit money. So students can win $10,000 to $28,000 potentially in merit money to offset their costs. Most popular colleges, just by enrollments: business number 1, engineering number 2, College of Science number 3, College of Health Science number 4. 10% of men in frats, 17% of women in sororities. A lot of times that does become the tribe for people, the community, for those who do it. Freshman or co-op stats, almost 12,000 co-op placements last year alone, 11,787, 3,052 different employers, and 511 students did an international co-op in 84 countries last year alone. And last question I have for you here, take a guess who their overlap schools are, Dave.
It's got to be Boston schools. I would say it would be like Tufts. And,
Good. Yep. Tufts.
You may even be talking about Harvard and some Ivy Leagues, quite frankly.
So you're right. There are 2 Ivy Leagues are big overlaps: University of Pennsylvania and Cornell.
Yep. Yeah.
And 2 other really big Boston schools besides Tufts: Boston College, Boston University.
Yeah.
And 2 other city schools that they overlap with a lot: NYU and George Washington.
Makes sense.
It makes sense. I mean, city schools, right? City schools that are very strong academically. So there's Northeastern University.
Great college. Tough to get in, though.
No, it's gotten, I mean, I shared this last week on the podcast, Dave. This is where we used to send our C and C plus students. Yeah. You know, when I was doing college counseling and boarding school, they would take 20 to 30 kids a year. And now all of a sudden that well just dried up on us. So you're right. I mean, it's a good study of how to turn around a school.
25% get over 790 on the SATs. That's a great time to go. A great time to go test optional.
Yeah.
Next week in the news, my favorite article, predicting yield in 2021. Everyone gets it. Rick Clark from his Georgia Tech blog. Inside joke, everybody. We'll tell you about that next week.
You already did.
That's right.
It's like a dig on me for sending you the wrong article. You're going to have to reread it. You're going to forget it.
Oh, yes. No, I will never forget that. Moving right along. Mark and Anika will discuss why is it so important to select the right friends in college. Our question from a listener is, what is the best way to know if your daughter is better at the SAT or ACT? Your daughter or son is better at the SAT or ACT. Our interview is part 5 of 6 with Julia Esquivel, the former admission officer and the current college counselor of Milton Academy, on how to work more effectively with your school counselor. And our college spotlight comes to you from Dr. Lisa Ruff, who will be doing a spotlight on Indiana University.
Awesome. Well, I'll see you next week, my friend.
Awesome, my friend. You take care, Mark.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please subscribe so you get every episode as soon as it is released. If you are interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on your favorite podcast listening app. I am the producer of the Your College Bound Kid podcast. We have a fantastic team of 9 people. Shout out to our 3 co-hosts, Anika Madden, Dr. David Williams, and Dr. Lisa Ruff. Our sound engineer, who fixes all of our many errors, is Nemanja Montfitch. The amazing music you hear is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Our image editor is Talha Khan, and our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitri. If you want to have a college coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want to ask, or a college you want Lisa or me to do a spotlight on, or if you have a recommended resource or an article you think we should share, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you, our family, next week.